Keep your comments flowing. So thank you for joining us for our third episode. My name is Kimberly Boyce Lazar, performing under the pseudonym Kymani Jade for short. I am an artivist and an educator and the creator of the New African Artivist Movement. I am passionate about the art and activism of the Pan-African movement, championing healing and transformative justice. Now, NAM, the New African Artivist Movement, serves to create space for Black culture and transformative media and dynamic art, celebrating fiercely innovative visionaries who collectively occupy the making of the history and the destiny of the African diaspora. And today, my special guest again is Mr. Kahlil Koromantee. Life coach and educator, Kahlil Koromantee writes motivational books for hard-to-reach youth and the parents and youth advocates seeking alternative tools to helping underrepresented, marginalized teens and young adults. He holds a master's in applied psychology from New York University and is a New York State certified secondary education English teacher. Kahlil serves as an educational advisor and board member for prisonrights.org, a mental wellness program using writing as a healing tool for the incarcerated and recently discharged. Additionally, he has taught writing and general life skills to adolescent inmates on Rikers Island. He is a mentor with A Call to Men, a program focusing on teaching male youth to become more emotionally present. And he represents marginalized students at the Center for Inclusion on Manhattanville College campus. Where I Live At is his most current project, and it takes a look at life for youth who age out of the foster care system and their realities as they transition from being wards of the state to independent living. The book offers assistance to those who choose to work with youth living in group homes or residential treatment facilities. So again, thank you, Mr. Kahlil, for joining us here on Calling on a Colleague.
Thank you for having me. Good to see you.
Same. So I always start off by letting people know how I met my guests. And Mr. K, we've known each other for over 10 years now, over a decade.
Yeah. I don't think you met me with Grays. That's how far we go back, right?
With Grays?
Grays.
Oh, you might be right. You
I know I'm right.
It's been a long time.
We pay attention to these things. Right. But yes, it's been
I have a Gray or two now too, so you might be right.
And I remember how all the usual scholarly stuff that most students have to go through before they graduate. And it was just a pleasure watching your own growth, Thank you. And look at you now, having your own podcast and whatnot, wonderful. Proud of you.
Thank you. So Mr. K and I met in about 2008, 2009 while I was attending the Borough of Manhattan Community College. And Mr. K, you were my counselor.
Yeah.
And I came to you at a time where I definitely needed the support and the mentorship. The Borough of BMCC is a community college. I mean, you all know that community colleges are typically 2-year programs. Some of us may need a little bit more time. I needed 5 years. More time. There's people who spend time in there on that over at the center, and you always encouraged me to create, to be, to become, to step into my excellence. I had the opportunity to, my internet is unstable. Are you still with me? Good.
Yeah, I got you. You're doing fine.
So I had the opportunity to co-lead the knowledge unit, and you were our advisor then too. And you've just always pushed me forward. Even after I graduated, you helped me get into my bachelor's program. You made sure that I didn't just get through my associates, but that I got into and got through my bachelor's program. And I think that's really what mentorship looks like, even outside of school. When I came to you and said, this issue is so important to who I am. It's so integral to who I am as a person, mental health. And I know from my personal lived experience that there are topics and there's issues that the community are dealing with. How can we tackle them? And you said, start with you. Like, you can do this work. And because of you pushing me forward and your constant support, not just verbal support, but actually saying, here are these resources, here are these people, I'm going to help connect you and I'm going to sit right beside you. And you did, because we organized 2 community forums at Sisters Bookstore. Sisters Bookstore, I would always recommend if you're going to get your books. It's a Black-owned bookstore. Jennifer is an excellent owner. And also, we had the opportunity to do some work at the Manhattan Neighborhood Network, where you sat as one of our panelists. Yeah. So you have just always been a part of my education and my development. And to this day, I refuse to call you anything but Mr. K. I'm going to put some respect on your name, and it's because you deserve it. So thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so where are we? So let's begin. Let's just dive right into the conversation. So the reason why I wanted to have this discussion is because there have been a number of atrocities that have continued to happen in our history and today in our present. And we really want to try and eliminate them from our future. And we can look at cases like George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Nyana Dior, and their senseless murders. What we know, though, is that as we continue to hashtag these ongoing names, we need to stop and think about, where does this begin? Where do these behaviors start? And we can honestly track back the policing of our youth to our school systems and all the other places that our youth find themselves. So today we're going to look at a couple of topics on juvenile justice, emotional literacy, youth counseling, healthy manhood, and parent stress. And it's all coming from this question. And that question is, well, we'll get to it in a second, because I want to explore some of the beginning of your work, and then we'll delve more into the meat of the conversation itself. So Mr. K, can you tell our viewers a little bit about who you are, starting with the work that you're doing in the community?
Well, I mean, I think your introduction pretty much summed it up, but if I wanted to add anything, I would probably say I'm what you call an interventionist. I intervene or interrupt destructive behavior or self-destructive behavior. Or if I'm dealing with more than one person, I'm intervening, I'm disrupting negative energy that's going back and forth, and getting to the original sin, for lack of a better word, right? What caused this this negative energy? Where's the source? Where's it come from? Because there's always a source. So there's a source, there's always an opening. I also am a believer of metaphysical matters. So when I'm counseling or life coaching or even teaching, I'm always aware that there's not just one person in front of me. There's a history in front of me. There are experiences in front of me, and this person is coming to me or showing up with all that. It's almost like they're coming in with all the persons that may have caused the emotional injustice, right? They're coming in the room with all those individuals. They may be invisible, but they're there. And it's up to, and now the job is to sort of peel one by one to get to the very first one. And that takes time. That takes time and patience. So that's the counseling piece, right? I teach about intercultural awareness. I'm doing that right now at Manhattan College. I'm really enjoying it. It's really interesting to teach people about diversity and inclusion, and especially those who never even considered, right? And so if you're not someone with melanin, then your sphere, how you look at the world is going to come from your perspective. And, and if the educational system looks at you as the standard, then everybody else is going to sort of follow along, and you are now the standard, right, to follow. And then it's interesting when you take a course like intercultural awareness, all of a sudden you realize that you are not the standard, you are actually part of the human experience. You don't necessarily decide the human experience, although some people might want that, but it's actually illogical and irrational. And I think we're in a time right now that people are starting to realize that the way things have been going is not working, and there's a shift. There has to be an acknowledgement that we are all sharing this globe, and that no one is supposed to be setting any standards. The standard is the human experience, wherever that means to you. And I think we're looking at that. And I think the globe is, I guess, when you hear people say the browning of USA, or the coloring of USA, I think it goes much deeper than skin color, but it does affect how we treat each other, how we look at each other, and the idea of education has to change. It's happening. You can't even help it, you know. And then of course I do life coaching, usually young, a teenager or a young adult, or maybe some parent counseling. I'll use hiking. Sometimes I'll do some hiking. Sometimes it'll be indoors, depending on where we're going with this. Parents will come to me and say, please help me. I can't figure this kid out, and he's doing all these crazy things, and I need you to fix him. And a lot of times the parents end up getting surprised because they realize that it's really them that need to shift their parenting techniques, and not so much the child. So that's always an interesting surprise for them when they go, you mean it's me? Yeah, it's kind of you. But we can work with that. Our sons and daughters are being attacked every day, bombarded every day with all kinds of isms. They need to come home to a space that is loving, welcoming, and non-judgmental. That means whatever it is that goes against your values, you're going to have to really examine that, if the goal is to be close to your child. If the goal is to have my child be close to me and have a relationship with me, then we're going to have to go into whatever we were brought up to believe, and challenge that. Your generation is amazing right now. You all are presenting a whole new way of dealing with justice, particularly emotional justice. What I love about your generation is that you're not afraid to talk about it. Black folk, we usually don't want to go there, other than I'll just talk to my pastor, or I'll talk to my imam. We don't like to talk about therapy, and that's white people stuff, right? We're finally getting away from that because we're starting to see the value in working on the self. There's nothing wrong with believing in God, but when you blame the devil on your flaws, or you blame the devil on a bad choice that you've clearly made, there lies the discrepancy there. So with therapy, we're finally seeing Black people open up and see the value. And I'm not talking about medication. That's part of it, but I'm not going in that direction, because I'm not a pro-med person, unless it's absolutely necessary. I don't want our kids to be medicated, but I do want our young people to have opportunities to reflect and let out whatever they need to let out, and so that they can be their whole authentic selves, whatever and however that looks like. And I think we're ready. I think we're ready for that, finally.
Thank you for that very in-depth explanation. And I think that it's that thinking and that mindset that allows you to be an excellent mentor. So I know that you also mentor with A Call to Men, and you work as, well, I'm not sure. What do you do with prison rights? And one thing I want to say, because we're not talking about medication, we're talking about the arts, for example. How does writing heal?
Well, those are two different programs that I'm part of. So prison rights, I'm on the board of, I'm their educational advisor, and prison rights, and you explained that in your introduction. We use writing as a way to help inmates and newly discharged persons express themselves. Um, Sometimes it could be poetic, or sometimes it could be an essay, and you'd be surprised and just how many of them just really have so much to say, right? And then some of them end up becoming poets because they become so creative with it, you know? So we go into the prison system and we offer an alternative to destructive behavior. And we say, here's a pen, here's a paper, put it on here, as opposed to lashing it out through violence. So it's another way of looking at rehabilitation, whether we're at the prison site or they're released and now they're with us. And then obviously we help them get re-entered and into the society and hooking up with services and good stuff like that. Link them back to their families. But we use writing as the main vehicle. A Call to Men, that is an initiative that Tony Porter came up with a few years ago. And the difference, and it's a mentoring program, and there's a lot of mentoring programs out there, a lot of good ones. What makes A Call to Men stand out is that we focus on teaching boys and men how to be emotionally present. And so the male mentors must also be emotionally healthy as well. You can't teach a boy or a young man how to get in touch with their emotions if you're not there yourself. So there's a training that goes on before you even get matched with the boys, to make sure that you're clear on what emotional presence means and what emotional justice means, right? We talk about justice, I'm going to get you back kind of justice thing, or penal code or prison talk, but we use justice in an emotional term. So justice meaning whatever the young person is still working through, our job is to help them heal, and so they can find that emotional justice. If we need the parents in, we go there. But the key is to match these boys who may be going through some emotional trauma with men, Black men in particular, who have also reflected, done their own work, and now they're ready to pass it on to somebody else. And I think it's a great program to be a part of, and I'm happy and proud to be a part of that. Yeah. So those are two initiatives.
Yeah, programs. So you've worked both with youth in college, youth who are imprisoned. I imagine both young men and older men. So you know what it looks like for men to come in and talk about their challenges out in the world, right? And we know that one of those challenges, again, is that all of our youth, not just our young boys, are being over-policed. So how would you say in particular the over-policing of our community impacts our youth?
Well, let's be clear first on how American policing began, because I think we need to understand what the original purpose of the police was, so we can get a clear understanding why we're here today in this situation. The police in America were originally created to protect the wealthy, the landowners, the property owners, people with institutions to protect, banks, corporations. things were to be protected, not bodies. It was never meant to protect bodies. And then as society began changing, and of course, income inequality started showing itself even more and more and more. Now we have to protect these properties from the bodies that are trying to rob, infiltrate, trespass, that type of thing. So when you have the understanding that the police in America were originally created to protect things, property, right? Even when going back to slavery, American slavery, it was the slave catcher that went and got your property, your thing left you. It wasn't so much a person left or even escaped. You didn't even look at it as escape. I need you to go find my property for me, So there's a history of looking at Black bodies as property. So when you understand that, and you make that connection, you can understand why someone can put their arm around someone's neck and hear, I can't breathe, but not hear it, because it's not a person saying it, it's a thing saying it, right? You can put your knee on someone's neck and you hear the person crying, and that's okay. And the person is crying for their mama. That's not a human being crying for their mama. That's a thing. And a thing is not supposed to speak. So I'm gonna press some more. So we have to really be clear on how policing began and where we are today. So when people say things like they need sensitivity training, well, why are we saying they need sensitivity training when the young white kid that killed all those church people in South Carolina, when he got arrested, they took him to Burger King because they want to make sure he was fed. You see what I'm saying? They didn't see him as a thing. They saw him as a human being. And so they don't need sensitivity training because clearly they've demonstrated that they can be sensitive, but they can be sensitive to someone who looks like them. So this idea of sensitivity training, I think, is a false story that we're telling ourselves. I think police reform is probably the way to go. But I think we need to be much more creative with the answer. I remember back in the 80s when we were contemplating on, Farrakhan, no matter whatever we feel about him, and I'm not necessarily an advocate of Farrakhan, but I am an advocate of good ideas. And I remember when he said, why are we locking up all these Black young men? Why don't we send them to Africa and the Caribbean to help develop these lands? And I'm like, that is a great idea, because you're turning punitive rehabilitation as actual rehabilitation, and you're including the social justice and responsibility in there. Could you imagine? I'm a lost soul. I get arrested for whatever I've been doing. And instead of going to Rikers Island, I have to go to Haiti to help develop the country and feed people and deal with people who have less than me. Do you think I'm going to come out worse? No. I have purpose. I found purpose. I am helping people who look like me. And when you help people who look like you, it's so hard to disrespect that after it's done. You disrespect it when you've never even thought like that, right? So, but when you're in a situation where you're trained to think brother, sister, you just think differently and you come out of it differently. You see, where now you might come out and say, I want to be an advocate for the homeless. I want to work in the environment, environmental racism.
Right.
I want to do something about social justice. You come out of it differently. If we could just change the dialogue from they need sensitive training to let's reform the system of rehabilitation, because it's not rehabilitation right now. It's purely punitive.
Right.
And we know it and we see it.
We see it. So when I think about my experience in the school systems, I can think about at least 3 different schools that I've gone into where there are metal detectors at the entrance. And I have joined the lines of students, hundreds of students who have to walk through these metal detectors and be searched, their bags taken off to be searched every single day. So this idea of a punitive system happens for our youth even before they've had any sort of problem, you know what I mean? Or there's any sort of injustice that needs to be resolved or rehabilitated. So I know for me as an adult who's been stopped by police officers at least 5 times in my life, starting as a youth in high school, it's a highly triggering situation for me. So I can only imagine what that's like for teenagers and preteens to have to go through, or even 18-year-old youth, you know?
They become numb to it. They're just numb to it at this point. Those of us who take this seriously, we know what that is. It's the prison pipeline. You're actually training young minds to look at prison environment as normal.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you ask any kid, they don't like it, but they're like, it is what it is. Mm-hmm. And when I look around me, I see other kids who look like me. So it is what it is. I go to a white school, there's none of that. And yet, do you know how many white kids carry guns and weed and all kind of stuff, and they just get a tap on the hand? Mm-hmm. So the double standard is not accidental. Mm-hmm. And we keep trying to come up with these band-aids when the issue is the capitalist system is based on the exploitation of Black and brown bodies and women, by the way. Mm-hmm. So when you have a system that is set that way, you know, I mean, white women finally had the right to vote, but it was called women's suffrage, but Black women couldn't vote. You know, so when you say women's suffrage, which women are allowed to do something about their suffering? You know, so it's taking a long time for us to get to a place of equity. But I think that, again, your generation and even the ones younger coming up, I think they get it. I think they have watched their parents and grandparents do the best we can with this system, to the point where by the time we reach 50, we're just drained. The system just takes everything out. I mean, just pay attention. Just look at our people sometimes, you know, and we're tired. We're exhausted. We're drained. This is a system that depletes any sense of originality. Those of us who are fortunate enough to go through it, we find ways to balance, right? So I might have to do this 9-to-5 thing that I'm not enjoying, that's clearly depleting my positive energy. But maybe on weekends, I can focus on my photography. Maybe when I get home, I could pick up on that book I want to write. You know, maybe I'll just come up with a plan because I got to do this, and this will allow me to get to where I want to go. Maybe I want to open up my own oil business, selling my oils, my Blue Niles. You know what I mean? This thing has to change, and I think you guys are changing it.
Yep. I I think so too. I think that youth are numb, but they're using somehow, I didn't even know, as for myself as a youngster, we're using that pain to inspire us and other people, and we're turning that pain into passion. There's no way to deny that these experiences are shaping our reality and that we are moving through the world highly triggered and embodying this trauma. And a lot of us are returning to the communities that we grew up in to teach the youth who, like us, are now going to have to exist in this world. And then there are a lot of teachers who are coming into the community hoping to help save our youth, right? So I think for all of us, it's hard for us to erase this fear-based narrative, not only of the culture that we reside in, you know, that we have to grow up in, but also of our youth, because we also internalize these negative ideas about our youth. So how would you say we can challenge this indoctrination as teachers? And how do we begin to deconstruct and unpack the biases, the implicit biases that we have as we engage with youth?
Are you referring to the Black community itself or just the general population? Because there's a difference.
There is a difference. There is a significant difference. And I would have to say, I want to think about the general population and then hone in on Black teachers. Because Black teachers are working a lot of times in predominantly white spaces when they enter into school systems that are serving predominantly Black and brown youth. So yes, the general population, and then thinking about, let's say, Black teachers. What can we do?
Again, the educational system was never set up to empower Black people, to empower Black kids. The education system was set up to turn us into servers. Non-threatening, good servers, right? So when you have an education, what I call colonial curriculum, right? So the curriculum is based on you glorifying me. How is that child from kindergarten through high school, and to a certain extent, even college, that child now is going to go through the entire regiment year after year of getting educated, and they come out knowing nothing about themselves, but they know everything about Napoleon and Caesar. And then then you have this internalized miseducation where they actually believe this stuff, right? So, you know, we got to start there with the curriculum that is still being taught to our kids. It's a colonized curriculum. Unless you have a conscientious Black parent who says, I'm gonna make up for the lack of authentic education. When you come home, we're gonna go over who Hannibal really was, you know, and you know, your African culture, your African history. How did you come? You're not just somebody who was a slave and then you were free. Don't believe that hype. You know, how did we get here? Critical thinking conversations to be had with that child. I'm constantly telling Black parents, you've got to do that. Why would you trust your enemy to educate your child? Why would you even think that they would do that properly, to the point where they feel good about themselves, they feel good about their melanin, they feel good about their hair texture? Why would you put all that in the hands of the oppressor? That doesn't make any sense. So you've got to start day one, start having your own library, from little kids' library to grown-up stuff, you know? So we can talk about what's wrong with the system, but if the system is not going to change or is fighting change, then I think what's even more important is, what are we doing in the meantime? Are we helping the system, you know, keep our kids numb? You know, when you ask your kid, how was school? All right. How you doing? All right. And then you're going to actually accept that? So it's really, it still comes back to us. It still does. I hope I answered that question.
You did. You definitely
Okay.
touched on a lot of
It's accountability,
right.
is what I'm saying.
I agree. I just dropped in, speaking about developing our own libraries at home and not just at school and relying on the texts that are in the school buildings. I just dropped Jennifer's website for Sisters Uptown Bookstore. If people are looking for a place to support Black bookstores, Black businesses, and find more text without having to really figure it out yourself, you can have someone guide you through that process. You spoke to the school to prison pipeline, and I just wanted to kind of share some statistics that I found in the new Jim Crow, Mass Incarceration in the Age of Colorblindness by Michelle Alexander. So it says, the United States now has the highest rate of incarceration in the world, dwarfing the rates of nearly every developing country, even surpassing those in highly repressive regimes like Russia, China, and Iran. There are around 500,000 youth in the US criminal justice system. A tenth of those are in New York. So more and more children are not finishing school because they are expelled or hauled off to jail instead of receiving the help they deserve. So when you talk about creating our own alternatives, what are some of those that you would suggest?
Well, like I said, I wish we would look at prison reform in a much more creative way, in a way that benefits Black folks. But with that said, it starts at home, man. They're out to get our boys and our girls, for that matter. That. It's not a secret no more. It's that. So why would you not arm them with the proper information they need? And why wouldn't you arm yourself? Now, there are things that you can't help, right? You send your child to the corner, to the store to go get something, and all of a sudden, next thing you know, he's dead because some trigger happy cop decided to target him that particular day. There are things we just can't help. We understand that. The new Jim Crow is real because it's just slavery twisted in a different way. Yeah, you might get 10 cents for every pair of jeans you make behind bars, but it's, and then you keep collecting that 10 cents and it turns into a pack of cigarettes or whatever you need, some deodorant, but it's still slavery. It's, it's just, they just changed the ad, right? They just moved it a little bit, but it's still a different form of slavery. And she's right. I agree with Michelle. It is the new Jim Crow.
So, accused of stealing a backpack, Kahlil was arrested in 2010, and we're talking about Kahlil Browder now. He was never convicted of the crime, and the charges in his case were eventually dropped. So he was a youth who, just like you mentioned, was roaming the streets with a friend, and he was stopped. They thought that there could possibly be weapons or drugs in his bag, and he eventually was arrested. So Kahlil spent 3 years at the infamous Rikers Island awaiting trial, and 2 of these years he served in solitary confinement. Kahlil Browder, upon release, later committed suicide. Now, youth housed in adult jails are 36 times more likely to commit suicide than are youth housed in juvenile detention facilities. My question, though, is, do we think that juvenile detention centers are the answer?
Well, no, obviously. And what happened to Browder is it's still hard to take. I still get emotional when I see that documentary. Right. And that's a story that gets repeated 10 times fold, on and off that island. I used to see a lot of discrepancies on Rikers Island where, COs would bet to see which kid is going to win a fight, and they would put a blood or a Crip in the same bathroom. They used to do crazy stuff like that. you know. Um, and a lot of these COs look like me and you, by the way, you know. So yeah, that's just one. It's the worst story only because it was publicized, but there's so many other stories like his.
Right.
You know, you know, De Blasio, our current mayor, he did one good thing by ceasing solitary confinement of adolescent inmates. He did do that. It took him long enough, but he did do that. Um, you know, you throw a 16-year-old kid in isolation. First of all, his mental development, his emotional development can't even handle something like that. You know, so unfortunately, Vada was the test that we needed to say something is definitely wrong. I think that they're still talking about shutting down Rikers Island, although my guess is they're probably trying to figure out, well, if we shut this down, where we're going to put these inmates. And by the way, a lot of residents don't want a Rikers near their home. So if we're going to shut this thing down, then what would be the alternative? And they haven't even figured that out yet.
Right.
And the kind of alternatives that people like me, more progressive educators like myself would want, they don't even want that on the table because it doesn't make money. They're trying to come up with alternatives that will bring in the money.
Yeah.
Remember, it's things, not bodies.
Yeah.
The system doesn't really change. It just gets tweaked a little bit. It's the same system, you know. So I think it's up to youth advocates and politicians who haven't sold their souls to help create change. And us.
Yeah.
And us. Black people need to stop voting only on general elections. We need to vote at the local level where it really, really counts. Your favorite president cannot do her job or his job completely if you don't take care of the local part.
Right.
And that's what happened with Obama. He could help us federally, but if your governor wasn't down with progressive thinking, you couldn't get that benefit. And so Black people need to really start looking at getting involved in the political arena at the local level where you pick the sheriff, the police captain, the mayor, all of that, and that starts changing things for the better.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you. I think the idea that our students have some simple infraction like not talking to a teacher when they call their name or responding to them at all, leading to a suspension, and then having, you know, those marks on their record, and that following them into adulthood. People don't even realize that following them into adulthood, that's not the answer. So I think about my personal experience in elementary school. And I remember our senior trip in eighth grade, while most students across the country may have been going to Disney World, Disneyland, Six Flags. I was at a parochial school at the time, and they took us to Rikers Island. They took us to Rikers Island for a Scared Straight program. And one of the first people that we met, we weren't even allowed on the women's side of the jail, the prison. And one of the first people we met was a 16-year-old, I believe. He was young. And he told us he himself had been on the same tour, and he still ended up there. And I can only imagine what that's like for a child, a 16-year-old child, to be imprisoned with grown men, some 3-4 times their age. What is that? What is the disconnect? We're missing a full step here. What do we need to do? And I know there are a lot of restorative practices that are now beginning in the school systems. So we have restorative circles and that sort of thing. And it's opening up space to parents and families to join So what else can we do in that vein to support our youth so they're not getting kicked out of class and kicked out of school and expelled and ending up in the street looking for community and, let's say, gangs, for example? Like, what else can we do?
Well, one of the things we can do, again, we have to get involved. We just can't keep complaining and then wait for someone to fix it for us. You know, wherever you live, check whatever your local representative is, whoever that is. You can affect change by simply demanding that there are more counselors, guidance counselors in schools. Right now, even if you want to become a guidance counselor, go on the Albany State of Education, Department of Education site. You will find it almost non-existent. Like it's like a maze for you to even figure out how to apply. Because what's happening is they're discouraging people from becoming guidance counselors. You don't even hear guidance counselor anymore. What you're seeing in classrooms now or in school is not the guidance counselor. You're seeing a police officer.
Right.
And that police officer is situated there simply to help the prison to pipeline succeed. There is no reason why a middle school child goes from becoming disruptive in class to getting locked up. That is clearly a prison to pipeline exercise, and they know it. Unfortunately, the parent may not be aware of what's really going on, because there's a term we use in when I used to teach high school, we used to use the word tracking. And tracking means once there's an incident that's criminal, that child gets tracked in a certain direction. And now no one's going to talk about college, none of that, because there's the assumption that, well, we know where he's going.
Right.
Just keep him going in that direction, you know, and then you put some words like he's inappropriate, hard to handle. You put those words down, and if you have any parents, mothers especially, who have children in first grade, in grade school, pay attention to words that the teachers are using. When you see words like he's inappropriate, she's loud, out of control, those are very damaging terms to put on a child in a child's file, because whoever reads that decides where that child's going to end up, and it just keeps piling up and piling up and piling up. So parents have to pay close attention. If your child is acting up in school, my suggestion is to find the coolest teacher rebel in there, find yourself a Mr. K in there, because that's the one's going to make a difference. Your child could be bored. Your child could be reacting to something and doesn't know how to express it. It doesn't necessarily have to jump to, oh, he's just a bad kid.
Yeah, thank you. So while you were talking, I shared a couple of books that I found particularly helpful for me, and I've mentioned them in the past episodes, actually the last episode, and that's for white folk who teach in the hood, reality pedagogy and urban education. And I think that's a great resource not only for educators, can you see that? Yeah. But also for parents to take a look at as we start to think about how are we interacting with our children in a distance learning atmosphere. Like what should I be considering about how I interact with the so-called neo-indigenous who come in with their own culture, African-American children and Latinx children as well. So I shared that book. And I also shared The New Jim Crow, which we talked about, mass incarceration in the age of color blindness. I know a lot of people who have heard about the text, but may want to know more. So I shared that resource, and that's also authored by Michelle Alexander. And I wanted to share a couple of statistics about the criminalization of our girls, because you spoke to that just now. And then I want to dive into your own text and how you're supporting parents and youth themselves as we, raise them. And so first, I have dropped in some information for the documentary Push Out. And I'm just going to read a couple of statistics from the same website that I think are really key to spotlight. So where are we here? Black girls in high school are 6 times more likely than white girls to be suspended. They're 3 times more likely to receive 1 or more in-school suspensions than white female students. They're 3 times more likely to be restrained than white female students. They're 2 times more likely to receive corporal punishment than white female students. They're 4 times more likely to be arrested than white females. And they're 3 times more likely to be referred to law enforcement than white females. And this information was sourced through the discipline data for girls in US public schools, the Department of Education Office for Civil Rights in 2018. So I definitely encourage everyone to check out that website to learn more. So Mr. K, you wrote 2 books. I think these were your first 2 books, called Before You Fly Off, Part 1 and 2, an African-American father offers advice to his teenage daughters. So with all these statistics in mind, and I know you're considering how do we even begin to address the disparities and going back to source, right? The students themselves and where these behavioral issues even begin. So why did you think to write these books?
My daughter was 16 at the time, going on terror, like so many other teenage girls. And, you know, her mother and I, we weren't getting it.
Right.
Like so many parents, right? We just, you know, we were focusing on the behavior and not the source of the behavior. Mm-hmm. And not to make a long story short, but I remember James Baldwin wrote a book called Fire Next Time for his nephew. His nephew had just turned 16 and he wanted to give him something to get him ready for America, right? You were this cute little Black boy to white people, right? But now you are not cute no more. You're becoming older, and once you get older, you're not. Now you are threatening. In other words, you are officially a nigger, not nigga, nigger. And this is what you need to know. And it's, I think it's 100 pages. It's one of his shortest books, but it's one of my favorite books. And I wanted to do something like that for my daughter. I wanted to kind of be, you know, introduce her to the America that I know was going to start waking her up a little bit, because until then she was sheltered. And of course, that's what parents do. We shelter them. Yeah. But it was time to keep it real with her. So her mom, you know, she had her own way of dealing with it, you know. Right. she went in another direction, and I'll respect her privacy. Our daughter's alive, so, you know, everything turned out to be all right, because, you know, mothers and daughters, woo, yeah. You know. Yeah. But I said to myself, let me try something different. And I decided to write a book. And I was thinking, before you fly off, right? Before you fly off into adulthood. You know, that's where the title came. And I got it binded. It was her 16th birthday. At the time, I didn't have any photographers to hook me up with a cover yet. So it was a standard cover that I came up with. And I gave it to her, and she took it to school. Oh, thank you. That's the second part. Yeah. That's when I started getting some skills on my covers. I appreciate that. Thank you. And that's another student of mine, Tanya, who modeled for me. I don't know if you remember Tanya from BMCC, but she modeled for me. So I just want to do a shout out. But she took the book, the manuscript, the binding, to school, and her guidance counselor assumed the book was already out. And she really loved it. And when she found out it was just a gift, she encouraged me to keep writing. And she wanted copies for her students. So that's really how it all started. It's just started by me trying to help my daughter's behavior issues by going into the source. And that's how the whole idea about going to the source began. And then from there, it just came after that. And then I think after that, the parents said, what about the boys? So Youngblood came. And then it's just been wonderful ever since then. And I'm still writing.
Yes. In fact, I want to read one of the reviews on the back of the book before you fly off, and I have a couple more questions, and then we'll move on to the other books you've written about. You're on your 5th text now.
Yeah.
So we have a single mother, Frances Reddick. Well, let me say it this way. Frances Reddick, a single mother, wrote, "At first, I thought the book should have been called Before I Whoop Your Butt."
I remember that parrot clearly, yes.
And she continues, "But after reading it, I learned how to become a more stress-free parent. Thank you. We need books like this in our homes and schools."
Wow. Thank you for reminding me. That was 2007. That was a minute ago.
Yeah, it was.
That was, yeah.
So, Mr. K, why do you think girls, young women as well, act out with aggression? Sometimes bullying each other, sometimes bullying boys and, teenage boys.
My daughter's 31 now, God bless her. I think it's ongoing. Finding the answer is just ongoing. I can tell you my personal story and my role in it. I made my own mistakes. Men tend to buy things for their kids. And I had to learn to put away the things and really be present. So it's been a learning experience. When you have a male child versus a female child, it changes you. Having a female child also made me look at the way I was treating women. I thought I was doing fine, but then she was like, "No, that's actually sexist, believe it or not." So when you have especially my daughter, she's very outspoken. I wanted her to be. So when you have that type of kid to check you, it can be challenging at first, but you get so much out of it. You grow. The why, I would say, just being a Black girl, and I'm saying Black girl specifically age-wise, you see so much misogyny in the community. You see it in the music industry. Depending on your culture, right? So if you're African and Caribbean, and maybe Deep South, girls don't have rights. Incest is normal. It's not talked about. It's not encouraged. But when it happens, it's like the taboo thing. Well, don't say it. Or they're blamed for it. Well, what did you do to encourage that older man from, disrespecting you and the family? So there's a lot of messages that girls get when they leave, just as soon as they leave that house. And the message is you are to be sexually objectified. You are to be disrespected. You are to be distrusted. I remember with the whole R. Kelly thing, and there was a rapper, I forgot his name now, but they were interviewing him and they were asking him, what was his thought about this whole R. Kelly thing. And he said, to be honest with you, I'm going to be totally honest. Chance, that's his name, the rapper Chance. And I love Chance.
Yes.
And so I'm not shaming him. I'm celebrating him because he was able to be authentic in his response for not empowering or not supporting Black girls and women, right? He was explaining it. I want to make sure that I'm not shaming, I'm celebrating. And what I'm celebrating is the fact that he said, you know, I didn't realize that I had internalized my disrespect of Black women by refusing to believe that they were telling the truth. I just assumed that they wanted to be with R. Kelly, they were getting money, and that was that. And I thought that was profound because, you know, those girls didn't deserve that, to be seen as part of the problem, right? And so it's that disrespect, it's the assumption that, you know, yes, you are the backbone of the family, but we want you to also put up with this, you know. Yes, I have high standards. Actually, I want you to have high standards, but I'm not going to have high standards for myself. So, you know, I think we have to be honest in the Black community. The Latino community, you know, they have their own misogyny issues to deal with, but with the Black community, we come from a continent that celebrates Black queendom. We come from a continent that had Black women warriors and soldiers. It's no big deal. We were reminded that in Black Panther and Wakanda and all that, you know, and that was beautiful to see. So why are we still continuing disrespecting sisters is the question. The Black Lives Matter movement was created by Black women.
Louder.
So why, you know what I mean? So I think we need to be honest about the misogyny in our community. I think we need to check each other when we see it. Black men need to have a different approach. We're not gonna end this by expecting women to end it. We have to end it. So for me, for example, I don't hang out with you if you are a woman abuser. I don't hang out with you if you are a pedophile. You know, I don't hang out with you if your first word to a sister is, yo, shorty. I don't hang out with you. You know, so I think men need to have a level of standard for other men. And so if you want to hang out with us, you can't do that.
Yeah.
You know, I think we need to go there.
Right. And you go there in your next text message to a young blood, a conversation with our sons. And not only have I read your books, I've actually shared them with my students, the students who were thought to be troublemakers when they really just had high energy and a lot of brilliance that wasn't being tapped into. And they devoured your books like I devoured your books.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
It you know, passed the test of time.
Thank you.
I want you first to talk to our viewers about what you mean when you say young blood. Are these actual bloods? What do you mean when you say?
So young blood is not blood. Let's not confuse it. You know, it could be a generational thing because when I was coming up, older men would call a young man, yo, young blood, come here. Let me talk to you for a second. So it's purely generational. It has nothing to do with gang mentality. I'm not supporting one gang over another. So thank you for that. But yes, that's what we used to call our young men. We didn't say little nigger. Right. We weren't there, at least not yet.
So when we talk about the issues that are impacting our women, we can't talk about our young girls without talking about, or young women without talking about our young men. So what would you say are some of the major stressors for young men today?
Today, yeah. I would, they don't really in general, I would say this notion that being hard, unemotional, mysterious, don't be too clean, don't be too clean, don't be too smart, you know, this is what makes you a man. I think that's one thing that women especially need to understand it keeps us in a box and it slowly destroys us. It's a slow kill. You know, when you tell a little boy not to cry, that little boy turns into a man who keeps everything in. But here's the joke.
Yeah.
When he becomes a man, if he's heterosexual, the woman will say, well, what's wrong with him? He don't open up. He don't say nothing. He doesn't want to share anything. You know, he's always quiet and secretive. He's so mysterious. You told me to put all that to put all that stuff on lock.
Yeah.
Now you want me to unlock it? Make up your mind. So I say to mothers who have Black boys, stop saying boys don't cry. Let that boy cry. When he cries, don't shame him for it. Just say, what happened? Talk to me. What happened? You know, I see that you're crying. I feel you, but you gotta talk to me. What did I do? What happened? Because then you are now creating an environment in the house where it's okay to show my emotions, to share my emotions. Because if you don't create that environment, then the outside world wins. And now you have a 10-year-old boy who used to smile, that lovely smile. Now he's not smiling because he's getting the message that, oh, I can't smile, that's soft. Something's wrong with me if I smile. So it's the messaging. That's the first thing I would say is we're not allowed to be other than what we're expected. That is the biggest thing because that's what we end up talking about when y'all are not around.
Yeah, I mean, the whole idea of boys don't cry. Boys who don't cry turn into emotionally unavailable men, and then girls and women cry about that disconnect and not being able to have intimacy, you know, beyond sex. So,
right. So teach me intimacy at 3.
Right.
You know what I mean? Show me intimacy. Don't just talk about, oh, she fine or he fine, but how does it make you feel when you're close? When you're connecting on a higher level, on a deeper level? Show him that, and he will be able to give that to a sister who can receive it. Mm-hmm. But you're expecting something from him that he was told that wasn't good. Right. He wasn't supposed to do that. And there's a lot, I don't think people realize, especially women, I don't think y'all realize how damaging that is. Imagine you, see, Black women, you have Oprah, Essence, you have all these messages, you know, that say, let it out, let it out. As a matter of fact, don't even just let it out. Go on an Essence retreat in New Orleans and let it out. And for 3 days, you're gonna work on yourself, right? And all the sisters are feeling good, they're empowered, they're letting it all out. And then they come home feeling like, yeah, I got to learn about myself, I got to work on myself, and now I'm ready to apply all this. Mm-hmm. Men, Black men need the same thing. Yeah. It's really not that complicated. Allow us to be the same way, emotionally healthy. But if your idea of a man is hard and tough and rugged and and all that, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it comes with a cost, right? So I'm gonna be that hard dude for you, but don't expect intimacy because I don't know about that.
So how would you define healthy manhood, and how do we as a community begin redefining this for ourselves?
Balance. We just have to learn how to balance that hard with the soft. Balance. Yes, teach our sons how to be intimate, how to connect with their own emotional selves. And then yet at the same time, back in the ancient African way, teach him how to fight. There's nothing wrong with that. He should learn how to survive, but don't just teach him how to fight as that's the only thing he knows how to do. Teach him how to love. Teach him how to fight and teach him how to love. Balance.
Yeah.
Teach him how to recognize systems that work against us. Teach him how trends may be popular, but they are in place to debase us as a culture. Teach him. Now, if you are too young to pass on wisdom because you had your child at 16, 17, then whose fault is that? Again, choices. Some things are not the white man, Kymani. He just exploits it.
Yeah, makes lots of money off of it. Okay.
I don't mean to sound racist, everybody. I'm just very clear on what kind of system we're dying in.
And this channel is coming together to host honest, transparent, truth-tellingly free conversations in support of our mental health. So tell it like it is, Mr. K.
Thank you.
So one of my favorite quotes from Message to a Young Blood actually opens up in the book, and it opens the book up with a quote from Dr. Jawanza Kunjufu. And it says, how can you do your homework when your home doesn't work?
Jawanza Kunjufu, he's one of my mentors. God bless him. He wrote Visions for Black Men, if you want to look that up. When I was a young Black man, around, I think I was 20, and I picked up that book. And it was not a book that was on my college syllabus. I had arrived at a point where I needed more. I needed to learn about myself. And I started hanging out with people who would go to Sisters Bookstore or the Liberation Bookstore on Lenox Avenue. And I would just pick up these books about Black people, celebrating Black people. And I just ate all that up because I didn't see that in my education system, right? And one of the books was Visions for Black Men. And it just really opened my mind as to the possibilities of what I can become and who I can become versus what the system is expecting me to become. So I would encourage your viewers to check that out. Pass it on to their boys and their men. But yeah, that quote just always stayed with me, and I decided to open the conversation with that.
It really stands out to me, and I've repeated it so many times in the classrooms that I've co-taught in, particularly with teachers who aren't quite understanding that. Like, how can, the students may not be bringing in their assignments, but they're sneaking food into the classroom. But what does that tell you? Are they hungry? Are they able to get their work done if they're hungry at home? Or the number of issues that can be happening. Like, how can I do my homework if my home doesn't work? So I think that is very powerful.
And correction, Naeem Akbar wrote that book.
Oh, I saw that.
Kunjufu wrote the Destruction of Black Children, which is also a great book to read.
Okay, I saw that. I was a little confused. The Destruction of Black.
Yeah. So I wanted to correct that.
And what was his name?
Naeem Akbar.
Okay, so
AKBAR, Visions for Black Men. Kunjufu wrote The Destruction of Black Children. It's like a 3-volume book.
Okay, I'll write his book in here too. And I'll go ahead and provide a link to both texts later on at the end of the interview because I don't want to take up too much time, but I have the title and the author's name here for you now. Remember, these comments will be up as long as the video remains up, and they are also posted on YouTube. So,
and just so that we have an understanding, when I was going to college, it was I'm having a technical problem. One second, Kymani.
Take your time. Okay, everyone, thank you for staying with us. This conversation is going to last a few more minutes longer. Actually, when I say a few minutes, I really mean about 30 more minutes. So thank you for staying with us, about 30 more minutes, because we're going to start talking about Mr. K's last book and his current project. So his last book is titled, I'm Not Gay, I Just Mess with Guys Sometimes, Real talk for young men who have sex with men but don't self-identify as gay. And then we're going to talk a little bit about his current project, Where I Live At, group home living and aging out of foster care. After that, as usual, I'm going to invite you to engage a couple of texts and find out more about how you can identify signs of mental health issues with your youth. Okay, so where were you, Mr. K?
I'm good.
You
So,
good?
yeah. So I wanted to just add about Kunjufu and Akbar. Keep in mind that during the late 70s and mid 80s, Afrocentricity was a big deal. And Black people were turning to authors and educators that were coming from a place where the point of reference was Black folk. So their thought process began with with benefiting us, looking at the lens from our perspective. So I want everybody to understand that it was Akbar, Kunjufu, Maya Angelou, obviously, but it was a lot of us producing. Michelle Wallace, oh man, you know, on Black masculinity. Um, and then, of course, that sort of the education system decided to kind of reject that. And now, I don't know if there's a resurgence, but I think Black parents are starting to look into these Black books because they want something different for their kids. So I just wanted to kind of throw that in there as well.
Right. And your books are really great aids for parents who are not only looking to learn how to be stress-free parents, but also how to deal with issues that are coming up in our children's and our youth's lives that they may never have had to confront themselves. And so your last book, before we talk about your current project, titled I'm Not Gay, I Just Mess with Guys Sometimes. Real talk for young men who have sex with men, but don't self-identify as gay. So I want to talk about the book itself and who's your audience? Who's the book for?
The audience. Wow, that's a great question. Obviously, it's for any young man who may or may not be struggling with his sexuality, number one. It's for any young man who may be okay with his sexuality, but he's having a hard time navigating this whole LGBT label. It's for a young man who might be finding himself, but he's not quite sure if he relates to LGBTQ agenda, which means, he doesn't like to be called queer. He doesn't follow the rainbow flag. This is a population that gets demonized, misunderstood, marginalized, and quite frankly, just dismissed. Mm-hmm. There are agendas out there that have to do with looking at homosexuality, bisexuality, or pansexuality from a, once again, Euro-centered perspective or European American perspective. And so what I'm proposing in this book is that if we start looking at sexualities from our perspective, Black folks' perspective, prior to the invasion of Europeans and Muslims, and Arabs, that is, and Persians, prior to the interruption of our everyday cultural lives, where there was never a word called homosexual. You were just the extended part of family. If you study ancient African culture, you will find out that the homosexual person or even the transgender person was oftentimes the high priest person or the high priestess or the gatekeeper. Let's go talk to the gatekeeper. You would hear things like, a two-spirited person. They didn't use judgmental words like Europeans did. They just saw it as what it was, right? And so for Black people especially, I encourage us to go not just study Black history or Black studies or African studies, study ancient African studies, because that's where the break happened. That's where religion was introduced to us, to our culture, to our old ways, body shaming, all these things started happening in our culture, and it was like basically an invasion, right? So when you talk about where all this shame came from, it was actually introduced to us. It was never for us. So when you hear people say, well, there's no homosexuality in Africa, where historically all historians know there was all kinds of sexuality going on in Asia, Australia, of course, all continents. To say that it just didn't happen in Africa is just more propaganda to avoid reality. So I'm coming from that perspective, not from the LGBTQ perspective. I'm coming from the ancient African perspective before we learn how to feel bad about ourselves and our bodies.
Thank you for that. And to follow up on all that you've shared, I want to share the link for a book, and I know you know this book, Mr. K. So Bonfu Some's book, The Spirit of Intimacy, Ancient African Teachings and Ways of Relationships.
Yeah.
So I'm going to drop that in the comments, because I know so many of us are interested. We want to learn more.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Of course. And so whatever resources we can provide, I'm going to drop that down here for you. And I would encourage you also to check out the reviews on Goodreads and on Amazon. I'm sending you straight to Sambufu Some's website now. So I'm dropping that in the comments. On Facebook, you can find it now. And on YouTube, I'll drop it there.
And Some is an important read because, again, you know, the notion that people just, you know, became gay because white people came. You know, that's like, if you really think about that, it's just illogical.
Yeah.
The only thing white people did was exploit our divisions. They took what was natural to us and perverted it. That's what they did in order to control us. You want food and water, or you want to keep your own way of living? Well, if I'm starving, I'm going to go for that Jesus gig, right? So I'll read the Bible, I'll do that just so I can eat. Same thing in Haiti. So we got to be realistic when we talk about how we just welcome new traditions into our lives. No, it came out of course, and we made decisions for survival's sake. But back to these young men do not relate to the LGBTQ agenda. They don't fit in that. They don't want to wave no flag. And it's nothing negative. They're not attacking anybody. As a matter of fact, when you speak to current teenagers right now, there's a new trend now. They don't even want labels. I'm meeting young people who are just saying, I like what I like. Especially with the girls will tell you, I'm with this one right now, I may be with him tomorrow. There's a sexual revolution that is not being talked about going on in the Black community. Remember, the Black Lives Matter movement was created by not only Black women, lesbian Black women. And so we are now seeing Black folks basically growing up. We're growing up, we're doing away with the stuff that was taught to us. And we're starting to see our sons and daughters in fuller ways. And so now it's not so much about pink and blue, because we know things can change. So why don't I just love my child and keep everything open, keep the possibilities wide open? Because in the end, you just want to love your child. You just want your child to be happy. So these young men are oftentimes demonized because they're blamed for the HIV/AIDS epidemic, which is not their fault. The culprit is unprotected sex, not guys who don't fit the stereotype, right? In HIV/AIDS research, that would be the one place I will say to you that they are acknowledged, because in science they want to cover all groups, and in science they actually use the term MSM, men who have sex with men, because they realize that there's a lot of hypocrisy in human nature. And so if we're going to really combat this disease, we're going to have to understand that men who have girlfriends and wives, men who are grandfathers, men who are football players and cops can also have sex with other men, and oftentimes do on the low, and they don't say anything. Now, I think if we create an atmosphere, an environment where our children get to just be their whole selves, we won't have down low. So for those people who say, well, why can't he just be himself? Why can't he just come out? The answer I want your viewers to ask is, come out to what? What is the net? Are Black people going to be like, yeah, we welcome you at the family table? Is that how it's going to be this Thanksgiving? Or are you going to make him feel ridiculed, make her feel shamed, talk about her, or she that way? You want me to come out to that? So if you want men, and I'm shifting to men, if we want men to be totally honest with us, then begin by creating an environment that allows them to be totally themselves, because women are certainly allowed to be themselves.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So what are some of the long-term negative effects of hiding your sexuality?
Psychosis. There's just so many psychological damage that can come with that. I know myself, I spent years trying to not necessarily hide, but trying to negotiate which part of myself is safe to come in this room. Do you realize, can you imagine how much work, how much mental work that is, that before going into a room, before even leaving my house, I have to decide, okay, can you come with me or do I leave you here? Mm-hmm. Right? Or if I'm at work and I'm working with a student, do I share this with this student or do I put that in check? Because I don't want any confusion, right? I will say this, the only time I will share my sexuality, because I don't believe it's fair that you get to wake up and just be you, and me, I have to announce my sexuality. I don't think it's fair that I have to do that. I want to be able to just be just like everybody else. But the only time I will say I will share is if I'm working with a young person who's struggling with his sexuality, because I feel that he needs to see me, someone like me, before he does anything stupid. Yeah. But other than that, I don't believe in the whole coming out thing. And these are the men that don't believe in that. That's an LGBT thing. We believe in inviting people in.
Mm-hmm. I used to always say that.
There's a big difference, Kymani. It's a big difference. There's a difference between sitting you down and saying, I got something really, really bad to tell you. I'm already beginning the conversation without my power. Mm-hmm. But if I'm just living like you, right? Because you don't say, oh, by the way, I'm straight.
Right.
You don't, right? Yeah. So I'm just being me too until someone says, hey, I'm just curious, no disrespect. Are you, and I'll tell you what it is, because I'm inviting you in. So the book is much more involved in that, obviously, especially because we're dealing with adolescents. There are other factors involved, right? Because when you're 16, 17, you don't have your own apartment as your place of sanctuary to get away from all the craziness. You have to deal with your parents who may not approve. You may have to move to a relative. You may have to have a roommate. You know, you may have to go to a teen shelter if people just can't handle it. But I'm focusing on young men in this particular book. I'm focusing on young men who, for lack of a better word, pass for straight. And the idea of passing, I talk about that throughout the book. This idea of passing, what is it about? And we know some of it has to do with acceptance, right? So, you know, I can't show any femininity, or else I'm the joke of the neighborhood, right? We love joking about, oh, that one, right? But what I also remind these gentlemen, whether they're teenagers or older, is that so-called femme guy, queen, whatever you want to call him, he's the one that breaks down doors so for the rest of us to live. So I hope you give my book a shot, because the sexual revolution that we're witnessing, you're going to see more and more men, Black men, feel more safe, feel more comfortable telling their parents, telling their peers. And I think we need to celebrate that. Let's not shut it down. Celebrate that.
Well, thank you for sharing your personal story with us today.
Thank you. Thank you.
So we are still tackling homophobia in the Black community, especially. How can parents begin to have these conversations about sexual identity with their children, boys in particular?
I don't know. I think you start with you. If you're thinking about having children, or if you have a child, start with you. Right now, your idea about what your child is gonna be and what he's gonna do and who he's gonna marry and stop right now, and just focus on love, support, and whatever he chooses to be, whoever he chooses to be, let that ride. Because if, let's just say your son is starting to date girls, right? What do you want? You want him to date a nice girl, right? You know, maybe the mother-in-law in you is kicking in, so you want a prize girl, right? You want to at least train him to pick those quality girls, right? The marriage type, the one you bring to mom, right? Maybe you've got the school prom on your mind. Who's he gonna take at the school prom? Channel all that and then say, what if it's a guy? Mm-hmm. Well, I want to be a proud mom-in-law, so I want him to pick the best in the crowd. I want him to be happy, right? I want to be proud of my son, and hey, I might even gain another son. You know, you have to do the change for you. And if you're caught up with what your son is doing in his pants, then what's up with you? Because at some point you're gonna have to get over that. All boys grow up, and at some point you're gonna have to get over that and deal with the question: do you want to get to know your son? Do you want your son to be in your life? Or do you want to be strangers? Because that's going to be your choice, not his.
A really important word for our parents, especially as we move into the next book that you're currently working on, Where I Live At, Group Home Living and Aging Out of Foster Care. So, Mr. K, can you tell us, how do our children end up in foster care?
Well, you know, after the last book, I decided to start tackling kids who age out of foster care. I was running into a lot of social workers who were working in the foster care system, and they were saying, you know, I really like your books, but could you do something on what we do? You know, and I hadn't even thought about it. And then I started learning that some of my students were in foster care and just didn't tell me. And there was a shame that was attached to that. And I had to understand what that shame was about. And many of them were facing discharge. Discharge meaning you are no longer in the foster care system, you will be released. Sometimes they give them some change, but If they're lucky, maybe there's some money saved for them that they get. But other than that, they're literally on their own. That's why the homelessness number is very high with young people who age out of foster care, because there's no preparation. And, remember, you're 16, 18, you don't totally get it. They've extended it to 21. I think there's talks now of pushing it to 24. How does a kid end up in foster care? There's a number of ways you end up in foster care. Neglect, abuse, especially if it's been reported and it's been proven, you cannot live with in the same home. If there are no relatives to pick up, to take care of the child for you while you're in treatment, while you're in jail, while you're working out, whatever you're working out, if grandma, grandpa, if there's nobody either available or even willing, because if a child's been having behavior issues, and then, Kymani, will you take care of my kid for me? I don't know. I've seen your child. I don't know if I'm ready for all that drama. So if no one is either available or willing to step in as a guardian, then the child is in foster care. And, it depends on the kid, on the kid's emotional strength, on how well they deal with placement. I know young men who've been placed in different homes throughout their younger years, to the point where they become numb to it. It's like no big deal. I know stories where they just had one foster family and they ended up doing very well and became successful men. So it really depends on the situation, the circumstance, and the parents and the kid himself. I've worked in rehabilitation treatment centers for youth. I've worked in group homes. I've worked for all kinds of kids. And I can tell you that the reward is in learning how to see beyond their circumstances and celebrating them when they finally got it together. But yeah, I want to tackle that. I'm looking at maybe next year we should be done. It's taking me longer to write this one because so much is happening and I can't help adding. For example, COVID is directly affecting foster care system right now. There are a lot of kids out there right now. The immigration border situation. When you talk about 545 children still separated from their parents, well, guess what? That's 545 young people in the foster care system. And I can tell you right now, 10 years from now, we're going to see the ramifications of the choices that we made today on these Central American kids. They're either going to become solid voters against this type of conservative thinking, get lost in the system, find their way back to their parents somehow, or just become delinquents, because and let's not forget the trauma that comes from separation and abandonment. I feel for these kids. I really feel for them. We are creating damaged children unnecessarily to become damaged adults unnecessarily. It didn't have to happen that way.
Yeah, and some of those challenges are happening in our homes today, not because, we talk about intimate partner violence and we talk about domestic violence. That could be happening right now in our homes today as we expect families to deal with their job loss or the 2 or 3 jobs they're still maintaining, and then now having to also manage their families. One child is a lot, 3, 4, 5 children are a lot. If you're home by yourself, or if you're dealing with a partner and the challenges that come up for you with that. So my last question for you, and thank you so much again for your time and your conversation. Before we jump into the call of action, which won't take too long, what are a few ways to identify if you are cultivating a healthy, functional, emotionally present family, especially as families navigate, again, these times with distance learning and schooling from home?
I would say the first sign, to me at least, of a healthy, emotionally healthy family is the language. That's the first thing I look for, is the language. What kind of words are they using on another? What kind of words are allowed in this house? Are people saying bitch and hoe and nigger like it's nothing? How are they acknowledging each other? How are they recognizing each other? Do they even celebrate each other? Do they know what that means to celebrate each other? Do they sit at the table together and eat, or do they all go to their own silos? So I look for the language. What's the language of this home? When I walk into a home, am I going to pick up violence? And violence is not necessarily physical. Violence can also be verbal. Violence can also be silence, but it's there. You see it. It's on the faces of the children. You know, is everyone happy? Do people want to be in this home? Do the kids want to be there? I can tell you, I have kids who I've met students who stay on the streets because they don't want to be home. They're just not street kids. They just want to be home. So, you know, what's the language of the home? That's the first thing. And then after that, everything else just is everything else, right? But that's the first thing I look for, is what's the language of this home? What's the energy of this house? How does it make people feel? Do people want to be there? Do they even want to be there?
Writing these down in the questions as self-reflection questions for us to really investigate or interrogate. So yeah, what's the language of our home, your home? Is everyone happy in your home? Why or why not? What's the energy of this house or apartment or transitional housing program or whatever, you know, shelter? Wherever you are, what's the energy of this home, you know?
Yeah, is critical thinking part of a normal, you know, family system where you think deeply about things? Or is everyone just dealing on surface stuff to avoid any kind of serious reflecting? You know, is this a family that avoids any serious thinking, but everybody's eating and watching TV to make up for what's in the room that everybody knows, but we're just gonna act like it's not happening? You know, if someone is, you know, is different celebrated in this house, or is different persecuted?
Yeah.
You know, is the one member of the family who's all into this critical thinking, deep stuff, right? They're all into this stuff. Are they perceived as the weird one in the family, or are they perceived as the leader in the family? You know, so I would probably just start with that, you know. But there are a lot of things a family can do to stay emotionally connected. You know, put some rules down. Everybody is home at a certain time. It's 11 o'clock. Why is he outside? Why is she outside? What is it about my home that my own child doesn't want to be in? What can I do? Did I get myself involved with someone that is pushing my children away, and I'm not even seeing that? Am I involved with someone who is manipulating me enough so that I don't have my support system around, and I don't see that? Or is everyone's voice valued? You know?
Yeah.
Do we, you know, maybe we go to church, but if we go to church, are the children happy going to church, or is it a burden? Well, why are we doing something we don't really want to do? Or are we turning Sunday into a family hiking day? Because God is everywhere, last time I heard. And he's especially in me and in you. So we can still go to church while hiking and maybe get something from Mother Nature. You never know. Are we living together or just living apart within the same tenement?
Are we living together or just living apart?
In the same space. We're just sort of sharing this space. I don't know you, you don't know me.
Yeah.
You know, in Youngblood, there's a section where I ask the parents. It's the only section where the parents have to get involved, where the young person sort of puts the book down and say, Mom, Dad, this is your turn. So I'm gonna give this book to you. That is actually the hardest part for a lot of parents. They think the book is all about him, and it is to a certain extent. But then when they get to that chapter where I ask you to look at the choices you made in your mate, in the father of your son, what did you base your decision on when you met this man? Was he a good provider? Did he have a job? Was he mentally, emotionally ready to be a father? Like, did you take all this into consideration? Or you didn't think about all that? He looks a certain way, boom, I'm gonna go for it. He doesn't have money, but he cute. He's disrespected me, but he cute. He maybe his social skills aren't the best, but he's okay in other departments, so I'm gonna just hang with that. Now I'm gonna produce a child with someone who does not have the emotional capacity and maturity to raise a king, because he's not a king. Maybe he looks like a king physically, but he's not behaving like a king, and you chose that to be the father of your son. And now you want to know why there's a problem. So I go into parenting choices. How did you, this young man right now you're having a problem with, let's go back, all the way back again to the source. How did you decide to create this child, and under what circumstances? And let's connect that to what's happening right now, and you will see a pattern. And that's where an interventionist like myself comes in and reveals that. You spotlight. See, that's the problem right there, right? I had a mother one time, she said to me, I need you to teach my son to be more motivated, because he's just not motivated. I don't know what it is with him. He's just not motivated. And God bless her, but it turns out that she wasn't motivated. And she had not taught him any skills on how to be self-motivated. So he just modeled what he saw. And because there was no one else in the house to provide something different, that's all he knew. So I had to go to her. I said, you have to show what motivation looks like. He has to see it from you. And she's like, oh, I didn't even think about that. Yeah. So we go to the source. It's always the source. Mm-hmm. Now, how many young ladies or young men, when they meet someone, they go, now, would he be a good parent? Would he be this and that? It doesn't have to be an interview, but I think if you approach relationships like a job, probation, evaluation, let's meet again, let's review how you've been doing. Let's review, is this job a good fit for you? And now employers are asking for essays. Have you noticed employers are asking you to write down why you want this job, why you think you'd be the best person?
Yes.
Ask him to write that down. Okay, I need an essay. It doesn't have to be a written essay, but you can have a conversation. Okay, why do you think you would make a good fit for me? Why do you think you would make a good mate for me? If you want to have children, what makes you think you would be a good father? And by the way, it works both ways.
Yeah.
Brothers got to do the same thing. You'd be surprised. You'd be surprised.
It's true. I think a lot of us are waiting to be chosen and not remembering that we can choose, you know? And what are we choosing? Like being very clear about what are we choosing. We stop at, you know, are they tall? Are they dark? Are they handsome? Are they making this amount of money? Do they have this type of education? But we don't really think about their emotional literacy. We don't think about what their aims are for their family beyond how many children do you want to have? Okay, great. Now that you know that you both want 3 or 5 children, how are you going to raise them? And having deep and meaningful conversations about that, you know? So
and when you and when your relationship is based on having these powerful, intimate conversations, then you're going on a journey together and you're finding stuff out about each other. This is the probation part. This is the interview.
Yeah.
We need to have more interviews, and that way we can start creating or raising children who are more emotionally healthy, because all we're doing right now is just, I don't know, I'm not even sure what we're doing. But I will tell you that we are hurt, we are hurting, and I'm just glad to see that Black people are finally ready to talk about it.
Yeah.
You know, and we'll have much better, much more rewarding relationships. Work on our stuff and let people be. Mind your own business. You got your own stuff. Clean out your own stuff. Don't worry about him or her.
All right. Well, Mr. K, thank you again. This has been an amazing conversation. I look forward to watching it over right after I hit the end button. But before we go, I want to make sure that I leave a couple more resources for those of you who are watching to take away. So I dropped some information about 2 different agencies offering mental health first aid for youth. New York City Well, they're a mental health first aid they're offering mental health first aid trainings, providing proven practices that will help you recognize the early signs and symptoms of mental illness and substance misuse. You will learn how to listen without judgment and respond to and help someone in distress until they themselves can get the professional care that they need. So I dropped links for that. They offer free 8-hour trainings that is available to all New Yorkers. They can come to you. You can go ahead and learn how to be a first aid mental health trainer yourself. Right now during COVID, they have taken their trainings online. It's virtual and they look a little different, but I definitely would recommend that you check out these websites and see what they are offering. Also, Mr. K, a few years back, you had first introduced me to Yolo Akili. Am I saying his name right? Yolo Akili?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And he has organized the Black Emotional and Mental Health Collective, BEAM. And right now they're doing a number of projects. One in particular that I think is relevant to our conversation is called the Black Masculinity Reimagined. It's a community building initiative that addresses the intersection of male socialization, mental health, and community violence. This intervention does this by training and working with Black men, boys, and masculine individuals to identify and apply skills to address the link between toxic masculinity, male privilege, mental health, and sexual and domestic violence, model and produce behaviors that promote masculine expressions that support gender equality, affirm the dignity of trans, queer communities, and same gender loving communities, and support the full emotional humanity of men and masculine folks. Build accountable communities and networks with men and masculine identified individuals, a community of yourselves that reinforce anti-sexist, anti-transphobic, and anti-patriarchal beliefs and behaviors. So I'm gonna drop their websites in the comments as well. And earlier on in the conversation, I shared information for Mr. K's organizations, A Call to Men, which is a mentorship program, and Prison Rights. And I think lastly, let me just go ahead and send you those links again. And then lastly, I wanted to just leave you with a couple of links where you can check out a TED Talk by Monique W. Morris, who put together the Push Out documentary, and to really think about how right now our concern shouldn't just be about children's education, but about their mental health. So before you go, I want to make sure that you also get the website. It's in the description, but I'm going to send it to you here again in the comment section. Check out Mr. K's books. He's an excellent author. He speaks directly to our youth. It's an easy read. Each of these texts, it's engaging. It's real talk for all of us. So please, please, please check them out. Just start by checking out the website and reading about each one of the books. And where can they find the books, Mr. K? Where can they order them?
Well, you mentioned Sisters. If you're in Harlem, she always likes to carry my books. So, by the way, Sisters, I believe, is the last Black-owned bookstore in Manhattan right now, if I'm correct. So, let's keep supporting her. Otherwise, I'm on Amazon. You can, if you forget the name of the book, just remember my name, Koromantee. It'll come up. But my website is Kahlil, Kahlil Koromantee.com. And you should be able to get everything from there.
Yep. All right. So I just dropped in a couple of these links. I'm gonna, let me see. I'm gonna share Mr. K's website where you can go straight to the text themselves, his 5 books. Please look out for his latest book. Go ahead, Mr. K.
No, and you can actually, whatever book you see, you can actually get it straight for there's a direct link to Amazon. So you can actually go to Amazon, or the website will take you there, whatever's comfortable for you.
Okay, perfect. All right, everyone. So thank you again. Please, please, please. We ask, our call to action, our only ask is that you amplify this information. You have been blessed to have it for yourselves. Share it with other people as you continue to educate yourself. Let us lift as we climb. And again, thank you, as usual, family, for helping us to create communities of care and collective consciousness. Let's continue to grow, glow, and build together. I want to leave you with some information to connect with Mr. K. Mr. K, anything else that you want to share before we wrap up?
I just want to say how proud I am of you, all the work that you're doing, and just continue the great work. I'm very happy for you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I cannot understate this. I don't know where I would be if I didn't find you at BMCC. I really don't.
It's all right. Thank you. It's okay. Thank you for that. Appreciate it. That means a lot. Thank you.
I wasn't going to cry, so I'm not going to cry right now. I'm going to cry later, though, because I was crying earlier when I was talking about this, when I was putting this together. But thank you from the bottom of my heart, sincerely. I really appreciate you.
It's all right. You're very welcome. Thank you.
All right, everyone. So that brings us to the end of the conversation. I'll be dropping a couple more links into the comment section, but it's been about 2 hours. So thank you for your time. Have a beautiful, beautiful rest of your week. And again, thank you, Mr. K.
You're welcome. Take care.